We've looked at his humble being in Bethlehem and Nazareth. We have experienced his amazing, rather radical teaching in Galilee and Judea. We witness his love for those that everyone else considered outlaw and sinners. We have seen his ability to act outside the forces of nature, to control the weather, and to heal those who were blind, diseased, and paralyzed, in how he even brought the dead back. He said, "I am the Son of God, the long-awaited Messiah," which the Jewish authorities rejected him and sought to put him to death. Christ's suffering and the demonstration of his kind of physiological stress that his human body was under is manifested here in the Garden of Gethsemane, the second most important garden after the Garden of Eden, and both are synonymous. The Gospels describe that he was sweating blood, and there's a well-documented medical condition in which patients who are under a tremendous amount of emotional and physiological stress can sweat blood, because little blood vessels within the glands burst, and the blood is expressed, and it's called hematidrosis. We are now in the Garden of Gethsemane, and the Garden of Gethsemane, which means an oil press in Hebrew, is where Jesus was arrested, and he was betrayed by Judas the Iscariot with a kiss. And from here, he was dragged into the Kidron Valley towards the house of Caiaphas, the high priest. The victims would be stripped naked and tied to a pole or a post by the wrist, and then flogging of the victim would start by 2 Roman soldiers standing on both sides, striking the victim's back, shoulders, legs, back of calves, and knees. The Romans used a whip called a flagrum, which consisted of small pieces of bones or metal attached to leather strands, measuring about 6 to 7 feet long. This brutal instrument was designed perfectly to tear the skin and severely bruise the muscles with each blow. Now, as the lashes struck the back, legs, and the hands, they would rip through the outer layer of skin, penetrating into the muscles and the tendons, damaging blood vessels along the way, and causing significant blood loss. The flagrum was a perfect instrument made by the Romans to expose the nerve and inflict maximum pain. Now, friends, historical tradition suggests that the typical punishment involved 39 lashes, and with each strike from the bone or metal could create a cut approximately 2 inches long and 3/4 of an inch deep, which would require about almost 20 stitches to close. Given that the Romans, by the way, delivered 39 lashes and calculate the closing of all these wounds, that would have required around 180 stitches to close. Now, if you multiply that with the 39 lashes, you would imagine how many stitches you have to close. This illustrates the immense suffering that our Lord Jesus Christ endured. Additional to that, the Gospels account that Jesus faced severe beating and torment at the hands of the Roman soldiers, which included the plucking of his beard and the piercing of his scalp by a crown of thorns. The plant that was described, the Ziziphus spina Christi, known as Christ's thorn, is an evergreen tree or plant native to the Middle East, actually had a very long thorn, not the little thorns that we would think from a rose bush. These were thorns that typically 1.5 inches or 2 inches in length and sharp. Now friends, the scalp is one of the most vascular portion of our bodies that have a huge blood supply. So having those thorns pressed down into the bony plate would have gone through all the scalp and would have created a huge amount of blood loss. People can actually bleed to death from just a scalp injury. So that is not a small injury to have, and that also causes more blood loss. After the flogging, the victim was often forced to carry his cross, and we know from Roman history and Corinthian that they were usually 2 parts, a large wooden beam called a patibulum and stipes. The patibulum is a 125-pound, but of course remember that this was the most horrible, unfinished rough piece of wood with spikes, and would have been pressing and rubbing into the places where Jesus was scourged. This would have opened more his wounds, causing more new horrific pain. Now in the case of Jesus, the Gospels tells us that he carried his cross in his weak and tormented state. And don't forget, it was after 36 hours of not sleeping. Now it is no wonder that Jesus also fell few times because of the weight of the cross on his back. That would have made it impossible to stand up and continue. And that's where probably the tradition of the 14th station, where Jesus fell 3 times in station 3, station 7 and 9. But as well, he needed the assistance of a passerby who is in station number 5, known as Simon the Cyrene, who was coming in from the country to help him carry the cross. With a great multitude of people and women followed him, who they were mourning and lamenting for him. Jesus was stripped off his clothes and knocked to the dirt, according to the Roman custom. Once Jesus arrived at the execution site, the cross would be put on ground, and he would be forced to lay on it. Then a nail about 7 inches long and 3 1/8 of an inch in diameter would be nailed to his wrist. The nails will hit the area of the median nerve, causing shocks of pain of Jesus' arms, shoulders and neck. The wrist is considered as part of the hand, and so the placement of the nail between the radius and the ulna still fits the definition of being in the hand. And it is in the position in which the nail won't rip out, which you have to have a solid point of fixation. Now the median nerve goes right straight through that particular portion of the wrist, and so there would have been a destruction of the nerve and tremendous pain, and even a dislocation of the shoulder. A tendon which is attached to the shoulder from the wrist will be torn, also causing the thumb to curl in and go numb. And then all your body weight will press down, restricting your oxygen circulation, which is every time you try to breathe, you will be in agony. You will be simply pushing down on spiked feet, then hanging from spiked arms. With each breath, you will be forced to alternate between excruciating pain and even greater suffering. In the center of these types was often occurred wooden seat, called a sedile, which is something like 6 feet. That offered minimal support. Jesus' body would be awkwardly turned on the seat, so his feet could be nailed below. The nail would have been placed between the first and the second metatarsal bone, missing the artery, which they drove the spike through the feet with no blood loss. The spike, however, misses the artery but hits the plantar nerve, causing unimaginable shocks and pain. Above Jesus' head was a sign proclaiming the victim's name. For Jesus, Pilate mocked him by putting up a sign that reads, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." The Jewish priests rejected and objected him, but Pilate responded, "What I have written, I have written." In Mark's Gospel, Jesus began his torturous ordeal about the third hour of the day, that is 9 a.m., having suffered from the scourging and the brutal walk to the crucifixion side. He would have been extremely weak and suffering from a lot of blood loss. As time passes, the loss of blood and the lack of oxygen likely caused severe cramps and muscle spasm. Now the tough part for people hanging on the cross was breathing. For Jesus Christ, this cycle of exchanging extreme pain for a small breath of air for hours would have eventually brought Jesus to be exhausted. And that's why Jesus was unable to say but just few words, because he can only talk when he breathes out and not when he breathes in. That's why what the Lord said on the cross was so precious. He could no longer lift his body and inflate his lungs. Now when the 6th hour had come, that is noon, there was darkness over the whole land, until the 9th hour, that is 3. Now at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, my Father, why have you forsaken me?" When Jesus cries this verse from the cross, some Jews who were there realized that he was quoting a 1,000-year-old prophecy from the book of Psalms, pointing to Psalm 22 specifically and the picture of the suffering Messiah. "I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax, it is melted away within me. My throat is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing. Ob, shpok el-hon, lo kiryadun, mono odin. From today you will be with me in paradise. Yo mono, am tehwib fardisu. Mother, behold your son. Son, behold your mother. Imo, hu brech, hi imoch. Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? Eloi, Eloi, lo mono sabachthani. I thirst, tahina. It is finished. Hu fi shalem. In your hand I command my spirit. Ob, beinidi, sumnu ruhi. So what killed the Lord? The loss of blood or the scourging? He never lost conscience or lost sight, because he was able to identify his mother and his disciple that he told him, "Behold your mother." He talked to the Father and even the thief, so he was perfectly conscious. So what took the life of our Lord Jesus? No man did. No Roman centurion did. No cross took Jesus' life. He was able to do something, and something we've never seen another human being do. He laid down his life, and with a loud voice, he gave up the spirit. Jesus gave his life. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. See, no one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own accord, and I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father.